The decision came easier than either student expected. That night, as they sat in the empty dormitory common room watching news reports of another council defeat, Hyunwoo and Jimin realized they couldn't walk away from the war. "My brother died, defending the outer colonies," Jimin said quietly. "He always said that running away from a fight just means you'll have to fight it later under worse conditions." Hyunwoo nodded. "My grandfather used to tell stories about the early colony wars. He said the hardest part wasn't the fighting. It was explaining to the next generation why you didn't fight when you had the chance." They contacted Commander Zeph that night and informed him of their decision. The crystalline being seemed unsurprised by their choice. "The Altarian Fleet Command has requested human tactical advisors," he told them. "You would be assigned to their border defense forces with temporary rank equivalent to junior officers." "What exactly would we be doing?" Jimin asked. "Initially observing and advising on tactical modifications to existing battle plans. If the situation deteriorates further, your role might expand to include active combat duties." Professor Kai-jun was less pleased with their decision. "You're risking everything on the possibility that you can make a difference," he warned them. "If this goes badly, you could be blamed for any casualties that result from human tactical methods." "And if we do nothing," Hyunwoo replied, "how many people will die while the Council tries to fight a civilized war against an enemy that doesn't care about civilization?" The professor sighed. "Just remember what I've taught you. Other species see us as either valuable allies or existential threats. There's no middle ground. If you prove too effective, they'll decide you're too dangerous to trust." 2 days later, Hyunwoo and Jimin boarded an Altarian transport ship bound for the contested border regions. The vessel was sleek and fast, designed for reconnaissance and rapid deployment of small military units. Captain Zara of the Altarian Fleet Command was their liaison officer. She was tall and elegant, with the characteristic blue skin and elongated features of her species. Her attitude toward the human advisors was politely skeptical. "I want to be clear about expectations," she told them during the journey. "My superiors are curious about human tactical approaches, but they're not prepared to accept massive casualties in exchange for tactical victories." "What casualties are acceptable?" Jimin asked. Captain Zara's expression showed she found the question disturbing. "Standard Altarian doctrine considers any engagement resulting in more than 5% losses to be strategically counterproductive." Hyunwoo and Jimin exchanged glances. The battle footage they had studied showed human forces regularly accepting casualty rates of 50% or higher to achieve critical objectives. "What if 5% losses aren't enough to win?" Hyunwoo asked. "Then we withdraw and develop alternative strategies," Captain Zara replied. "Preserving our forces is more important than winning individual battles. Even if withdrawing means abandoning civilian populations to enemy occupation?" Captain Zara's uncomfortable silence answered the question. They arrived at the border system of Kepler 186 to find the Altarian defense fleet in a state of barely controlled chaos. 3 major battles had been fought in the past week, all resulting in council defeats. Morale was low and resources were running out. Admiral Nex of the Altarian command staff briefed them on the current situation. The Devaks had established forward bases in 2 nearby systems and were preparing for another major offensive. Intelligence suggested they were targeting Kepler 186's orbital shipyards, which produced most of the Council's advanced fighter craft. "Our defensive strategy focuses on protecting key installations while minimizing engagement with superior enemy forces," Admiral Nex explained. "We're waiting for reinforcements from the core worlds." "How long until the reinforcements arrive?" Jimin asked. 3 weeks at minimum," Admiral Nex replied. "Possibly longer if other systems require priority assistance." Hyunwoo studied the tactical displays showing Devak fleet positions. "They're not going to wait 3 weeks. They'll attack within days while they still have numerical superiority. Our analysts estimate at least a week before they're ready to launch another offensive," Admiral Nex said confidently. But the Devaks attacked the next morning. Warning klaxons woke Hyunwoo and Jimin from their sleep in the guest quarters aboard the Altarian flagship. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors in red as crew members rushed to battle stations. Captain Zara found them in the officers' mess. DVAC forces have entered the system, she reported tersely. Over 400 ships. Admiral Nex is requesting immediate consultation on defensive options. They rushed to the command center, where holographic displays showed the approaching enemy fleet. The DVACs were advancing in a massive formation that dwarfed the Altarian defensive force of 80 ships. Standard defensive doctrine calls for withdrawal to the inner system, Admiral Nex announced to his staff. We'll establish defensive positions around the orbital shipyards and hope our reinforcements arrive before the enemy can organize an assault. Admiral, Hyunwoo interrupted. May I suggest an alternative approach? The blue-skinned commander turned to face the young human. You have tactical recommendations? The DVACs are expecting you to retreat to defensive positions, Hyunwoo explained. Their formation is designed to counter static defenses. But what if you attacked them instead? The Altarian officers in the command center looked shocked. Several began speaking at once about the impossibility of attacking a numerically superior force. You want us to commit suicide? Captain Zara said bluntly. I want you to do what they don't expect, Hyunwoo replied. Hit them while they're still, in approach formation. Target their command ships and communication nodes. Force them to react instead of executing their planned attack. Admiral Nex studied the tactical display. Our force would be destroyed. 80 ships cannot defeat 400. They don't have to defeat them, Jimin added, supporting her friend's suggestion. They just have to damage them enough to prevent the attack on the shipyards. And how many of our ships would survive such an attack? Admiral Nex asked. Hyunwoo met the Admiral's gaze directly. Maybe 20, maybe less. The command center fell silent. The Altarian officers were clearly horrified by the suggested casualty rates. That's unacceptable, Admiral Nex said firmly. I will not sacrifice 75% of my force for a tactical objective. Even if that tactical objective saves the shipyards and thousands of civilian workers? Hyunwoo asked. There must be another way, Admiral Nex insisted. We'll hold defensive positions and hope our reinforcements arrive in time. But as the hours passed, it became clear that defensive positions wouldn't be enough. The DVAC fleet had split into multiple groups surrounding the system's key installations. They were preparing for a simultaneous assault that would overwhelm the scattered Altarian forces. They're going to destroy everything, Captain Zara said as she watched the enemy movements. The shipyards, the mining stations, the civilian habitats. We don't have enough ships to defend all of them. You have enough ships to attack, Jimin pointed out. If you concentrated your force and hit one of their formation groups, you could disrupt their entire plan. Admiral Nex shook his head. I've already explained why that's impossible. The casualty rates would be astronomical. The casualty rates will be astronomical anyway, Hyunwoo said. At least if you attack, some of your people survive and the mission succeeds. The debate continued for hours while the DVAC fleet moved into position. Finally, with enemy forces beginning their final approach, Admiral Nex made his decision. All ships will maintain defensive positions around their assigned targets, he ordered. We'll hold our ground until reinforcements arrive. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Altarian forces fought bravely from their defensive positions, but they were overwhelmed by superior numbers. One by one, the orbital installations fell to concentrated DVAC assault. By the end of the engagement, 63 Altarian ships had been destroyed. The shipyards were burning rubble. Thousands of civilian workers were dead or missing. The system's defenses had been completely eliminated, but 17 Altarian ships had survived the battle, maintaining Admiral Nex's acceptable casualty threshold. As rescue operations began, Admiral Nex called Hyunwoo and Jimin to his damaged command center. His elegant blue features were marked with exhaustion and defeat. Your tactical recommendations, he said quietly. If we had followed them, how many installations would have survived? Hyunwoo studied the damage reports on the holographic displays. All of them, probably. If you had concentrated your attack on their command group, the rest of their fleet would have been too disorganized to coordinate the assault. The crisis deepened over the next 2 days. Emergency broadcasts from the 3 attacked systems painted a picture of complete disaster. The Divak Empire's 800-ship fleet had swept through Council defenses like they were barely there. Millions of civilians were fleeing their homes while military forces retreated in disorder. Hyunwoo and Jimin watched the news reports in the nearly empty academy cafeteria. With most students gone to join their homeworld militaries, the massive dining hall felt like a tomb. Only a handful of faculty members and support staff remained on Nexus Prime. The situation on Altair 7 is deteriorating rapidly, announced the news presenter. Divak forces have established orbital control and begun landing ground troops. Council reinforcements are still 3 days away. The holographic display showed scenes of destruction that made both humans sick to their stomachs. Cities burning under orbital bombardment. Civilian transports being destroyed as they tried to evacuate. Council defense stations exploding in silent flashes of light. "Where are the Saurian shock troops?" Jimin asked. Talon was bragging about how they would show the Divaks what real warriors could do. "Probably maintaining defensive formations and minimizing casualties," Hyunwoo replied bitterly. "Standard galactic military doctrine. Preserve your forces and wait for reinforcements." Commander Zeph approached their table, his crystalline form catching the cafeteria's lighting in prismatic patterns. "The Council has requested an emergency meeting with all remaining human personnel at this academy," he announced. "All human personnel?" Hyunwoo asked. "There are only 3 of us." "Precisely," Commander Zeph replied. "You, Miss Jimin, and Professor Kaijun. The Council wishes to conduct what they call a consultation on alternative strategic options." An hour later, the 3 humans found themselves in the Academy's secure communication center. The room was designed for high-level military conferences, with holographic projectors capable of creating life-size images of participants from across the galaxy. As the system activated, the room filled with the 3-dimensional forms of Council members from dozens of worlds. Hyunwoo recognized some of the species from his studies: tall, blue-skinned Altarians, insectoid Vorthax, crystalline Geodians, and others he had never seen before. At the center of the group was Fleet Admiral Korth of the Saurian Navy, his massive reptilian form dominating the display, his yellow eyes fixed on the 3 humans with an expression that might have been desperation. "We will make this brief," Admiral Korth announced. "The current military situation requires immediate action. Traditional Council forces are proving inadequate against Divak tactical innovations. We need alternatives." A Vorthak military commander stepped forward, her insectoid features clicking with agitation. "Our analysts have reviewed classified studies of human warfare methods. The tactical approaches are unorthodox but potentially effective." Professor Kaijun remained silent, waiting for the Council to make their request explicit. "We want to understand," continued the Vorthak commander, "how human forces would respond to the current crisis. Not theoretically, but practically. What actions would human military leaders take if given unrestricted authority to engage Divak forces?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Every alien face in the holographic display was focused on the 3 humans, waiting for an answer that could change the course of galactic history. Professor Kaijun spoke first. "You're asking us to provide tactical recommendations based on human military doctrine." "Precisely," Admiral Korth confirmed. "The restricted files indicate that human strategic thinking might offer solutions that conventional approaches have not considered." "And if we provide those recommendations?" Professor Kaijun asked. "What guarantee do we have that they will be implemented?" A new figure stepped forward in the holographic display. Hyunwoo recognized the energy signature of a high-ranking Altarian fleet commander. "That depends on the nature of your recommendations," the being said. "If your proposals offer reasonable prospects for success with acceptable casualty rates, they will be given serious consideration." Professor Kaijun's smile was grim. "I think you misunderstand something fundamental about human warfare doctrine. We don't calculate acceptable casualty rates. We determine what needs to be accomplished and then do whatever is necessary to accomplish it." The Council members exchanged glances that suggested growing unease. This was clearly not what they wanted to hear. "Perhaps," suggested a crystalline Geodian commander, You could provide recommendations that incorporate human tactical innovation while remaining within established parameters for civilized warfare. Civilized warfare, Professor Kaijun repeated slowly. That's an interesting concept. Tell me, how civilized has Devak warfare been for the civilian populations they've been conquering? More uncomfortable shifting among the council members. Several began speaking at once before Admiral Korth restored order. The Devaks follow established galactic conventions regarding civilian populations, he said firmly. Casualties are regrettable but within acceptable parameters for military operations. Hyunwoo found himself speaking before he could stop himself. Acceptable to who? All eyes turned to him. He could feel his heart racing as he realized he was about to challenge the highest military authorities in galactic civilization. I've been watching the news reports, he continued, his voice growing stronger. Millions of people are fleeing their homes. Cities are being destroyed. Families are being separated and killed. And you're calling this acceptable because it follows established conventions? Young human, Admiral Korth said in a warning tone, you do not understand the complexities of galactic military policy. Maybe not, Hyunwoo replied. But I understand what I would do if someone was attacking my home and killing my people, and what would that be? Asked the Altarian fleet commander. Hyunwoo looked at Professor Kaijun, who nodded encouragingly. Then he turned back to face the assembled council leaders. I would make them regret ever deciding to start this war. I would make the cost of attacking us so high that they would surrender rather than continue fighting. I would hunt down every ship in their fleet and destroy it. I would find their home worlds and make them understand that attacking innocent people has consequences. The holographic display fell silent. Some council members appeared shocked by the young human's intensity. Others looked frightened. Jimin stepped forward to stand beside her friend. He's right, she said simply. That's what humans would do. That's what we always do when someone threatens what we care about. Admiral Korth's reptilian features twisted into what might have been disgust. You're talking about total war. Unlimited. Escalation. The destruction of entire civilizations. We're talking about ending the threat, Professor Kaijun said calmly. Which is what you asked us to discuss. But at what cost? Demanded the Vorthak commander. Your methods would result in casualties numbering in the hundreds of millions. How? Many casualties will there be if the Devaks continue expanding? Professor Kaijun asked in return. How many worlds will be conquered? How many civilian populations will be displaced? How many years of war and suffering could be prevented by decisive action now? The argument continued for another hour, with council members expressing horror at human tactical recommendations while simultaneously acknowledging their potential effectiveness. The fundamental problem was clear. Human methods would work, but they would fundamentally change the nature of galactic civilization. Finally, Admiral Korth called for an end to the consultation. We will consider what has been discussed here today, he announced formally. The Council will vote on whether to modify current restrictions on human military participation. When? Professor Kaijun asked. Within 48 hours, Admiral Korth replied. The military situation requires immediate decision-making. As the holographic images faded, the three humans found themselves alone in the communication center. The silence was heavy with implications. Do you think they'll lift the ban? Jimin asked. Professor Kaijun shook his head. I think they'll try to find a middle ground that doesn't exist. They want human effectiveness without human methods. They want our results without accepting our approach. And if they refuse, Hyunwoo asked, then they'll lose this war, Professor Kaijun said, simply. And eventually they'll lose the next one too, because the galaxy is a dangerous place, and civilized warfare only works when all sides agree to be civilized. That evening, news reports indicated that the Devak offensive was accelerating. A fourth council system was under attack and defensive. Forces were requesting immediate evacuation assistance for civilian populations. But buried in the classified military communications that Professor Kaijun had access to was more disturbing information. Intelligence reports suggested that the current Devak offensive was only the first phase of a much larger campaign. The Empire was mobilizing additional fleets for attacks on core Council worlds. They're not just expanding their territory, Professor Kaijun explained to his students as they reviewed the classified data. They're preparing to overthrow the entire Council system and replace it with their own empire. How long before they reach the core worlds? Jimin asked. At their current rate of expansion? 6 months, maybe less. Hyunwoo stared at the tactical displays. The next morning brought news that changed everything at the academy. Emergency broadcasts filled every screen and communication device across Nexus Prime. The Divac Empire had launched a massive offensive against 3 Council border worlds. Initial reports suggested that conventional defense forces were being overwhelmed. Hyunwoo and Jimin watched the news feeds in their dormitory common room, along with dozens of other students. The holographic displays showed scenes of destruction, from the attacked systems, burning cities, fleeing civilians, and desperate military communications calling for reinforcements. The Divac fleet consists of over 800 vessels, announced the news presenter, a tall blue-skinned being with 4 arms. This represents the largest military offensive in galactic history. Council forces are requesting emergency support from all member species. Around the common room, alien students began receiving personal communications from their home worlds. Many were being recalled immediately for military service. The atmosphere was tense with fear and excitement. Talon Creeks stood near the main display, his scaled form towering over the other students. Finally, he said in his rumbling voice, a real war. Not border skirmishes or patrol duties, but actual combat against a major enemy. Other Saurian students gathered around him, discussing their expectations of glorious battle. Their reptilian features showed eager anticipation rather than fear. Vex Nomura floated nearby, the energy being's form shifting between different colors as emotions affected his appearance. My people are mobilizing the 3rd Energy Fleet, Vex announced. We will show the Devacs what happens when they challenge advanced civilizations. Students from various species talked excitedly about which units they would join and what roles they would play in the coming conflict. The academy had suddenly become a staging ground for war, but Hyunwoo and Jimin remained silent, watching the celebration with growing unease. Every other student was making plans to leave the academy and join their species' military forces. Only the humans had nowhere to go. Attention all students, announced Commander Zeph over the academy's communication system. Classes are suspended, indefinitely. All non-human students are to report to their species coordinators for military deployment assignments. Academy faculty will assist with transportation arrangements to your home worlds. The common room erupted in noise as students rushed to gather their belongings and make contact with their military services. Within hours, the academy would be nearly empty except for essential staff and the humans who had been banned from participating in the war. This is our chance, Jimin said quietly to Hyunwoo as they watched their classmates prepare to leave. Everyone will be gone. Maybe we can access more classified files without being noticed. Hyunwoo nodded. Professor Kaijun said there were thousands of storage crystals in that vault. We only looked at a few of them. That evening, with most students already departed for their home worlds, the academy felt like a ghost town. The massive corridors echoed with their footsteps as Hyunwoo and Jimin made their way to the archive building. Security was lighter than usual, with many guards having been reassigned to assist with student evacuations. They returned to the classified vault on level 5, using Commander Zeph's access code to enter the restricted section. The thousands of storage crystals seemed to glow in the dim lighting, each one containing secrets about human military capabilities. Look at this, Jimin said, pointing to a section labeled Historical Analysis, Earth Conflicts. The crystals here contained data going back thousands of years, documenting human warfare from ancient times to the present. Hyunwoo selected a crystal marked Tactical Evolution, Recent Patterns, and inserted it into the holographic display terminal. After entering the access code, the system activated and filled the vault with 3-dimensional images. What they saw was a comprehensive analysis of human military behavior across dozens of conflicts. The data had been compiled by teams of alien, analysts who had studied every available record of human warfare. They've been watching us for decades, Hyun-woo realized as he read through the analysis reports. Every battle, every tactical decision, every strategic choice. They have records of conflicts that Earth's own historians have forgotten. The holographic display showed a timeline of human military evolution. Ancient battles fought with primitive weapons, medieval sieges lasting months, industrial wars involving millions of soldiers, and modern space conflicts using advanced technology. But despite the changing technology and scale, certain patterns remained constant throughout human history. Look at this, Jimin said, highlighting a section of the analysis. They've identified what they call uniquely human tactical behaviors that appear in every era of our military history. The first behavior was labeled disproportionate response. The alien analyst had documented dozens of cases where human military forces had responded to relatively minor threats with overwhelming force. Small raids that triggered massive counterattacks, border incidents that escalated into full-scale wars, diplomatic insults that led to decades of conflict. They don't understand proportionality, Hyun-woo read from the analysis. Human military doctrine appears to operate on binary principles. Either a threat is ignored completely, or it is met with maximum possible force. The second behavior was emotional escalation. The analyst had identified a pattern where human military effectiveness actually increased when their forces suffered casualties or setbacks. Unlike other species who became more cautious after losses, humans became more aggressive and determined. This is contrary to all known military psychology, the report stated. Losses should reduce morale and fighting effectiveness. But human forces demonstrate improved performance when motivated by revenge or the desire to avenge fallen comrades. The third behavior was perhaps the most disturbing to the alien analysts. Acceptable loss ratios. The data showed that human forces were willing to accept casualty rates that other species considered unthinkable. Battles where 90% losses were considered acceptable if the objective was achieved. Human military commanders regularly make tactical decisions that prioritize mission success over force preservation, the analysis concluded. This creates unpredictable battlefield conditions where conventional risk assessment becomes meaningless. As they read through more of the analysis, a picture emerged of how alien species viewed human warfare. From their perspective, humans fought like they were already dead. Every battle was approached as if the outcome would determine the survival of the entire species. Here's something interesting, Jimin said, calling up a new section of data. Psychological profiles of human military personnel. The profiles had been compiled from interviews with human prisoners of war, defectors, and volunteers who had participated in alien research programs. The results painted a picture of human military psychology that clearly frightened the alien analysts. Subject exhibits no fear of death when discussing combat scenarios, read one profile. Instead, subject expresses concern about failing to protect civilians or disappointing dead comrades. Death appears to be viewed as preferable to perceived failure. Another profile was even more telling. Subject describes warfare as personal duty to ancestors and descendants. Does not distinguish between individual survival and species survival. Views every military engagement as existentially significant, regardless of actual strategic importance. They think we're insane, Hyun-woo said after reading dozens of similar profiles. Maybe we are, Jimin replied quietly. Maybe from their perspective our entire approach to conflict is crazy. But the most revealing section of the analysis dealt with human tactics in specific battle scenarios. The alien researchers had run thousands of simulations, trying to predict how human forces would respond to various tactical situations. The results were consistent. Human forces would choose the option that maximized damage to the enemy, regardless of the cost to themselves. In scenarios where other species would retreat or negotiate, humans would attack. In situations where logic dictated surrender, humans would fight to the last soldier. This explains the ban, Hyun-woo realized. They're not afraid we can't fight effectively. They're afraid we're too effective. The holographic display shifted to show current strategic analyses of the DVAC conflict. Alien military experts had been studying DVAC tactics and developing countermeasures based on conventional galactic warfare principles. Standard containment protocols, G-Men read from the tactical recommendations. Establish defensive perimeters, minimize casualties, negotiate favorable terms for civilian evacuations, focus on preserving Council military assets while limiting DVAC expansion. But buried in the classified files was another set of recommendations that had been rejected by the Council. These were labeled Alternative Strategic Options, Human Methodologies. The rejected plans were radically different. Instead of defensive containment, they called for immediate offensive strikes against DVAC population centers. Rather than preserving military assets, they recommended accepting massive casualties to achieve decisive victory. Instead of protecting civilian populations, they suggested using civilian losses as motivation for escalated retaliation. Total War Doctrine, the files labeled these plans. Bastabar. Professor Kai-Jun moved closer to the holographic display, his weathered face illuminated by the images of space combat. At 63 years old, he was one of the oldest humans at the Academy, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold decades of secrets. "You want to know why I'm here?" he asked the two students. "I'm not here to teach alien cadets about human culture or language. I'm here because the Council needs someone who understands how humans think about war." He manipulated the holographic controls, calling up new footage. This time the images showed a massive space battle involving hundreds of ships from multiple species. The timestamp indicated it was only 4 months old. "This is the Battle of Kepler 442. Professor Kai-Jun explained. It was the first major engagement where human forces fought alongside other Council species against the DVACs. Hyunwoo and Jimin watched as the tactical display showed the opposing forces. The DVAC fleet was enormous, with over 300 ships of various sizes arranged in complex attack formations. The Council force was smaller, but included vessels from 12 different species, each using their own tactical doctrines. Standard galactic military theory, Professor Kai-Jun continued, says that mixed species forces should operate under unified command with coordinated strategies. Every species contributes their strengths while covering each other's weaknesses. The battle footage began to play. Initially, everything proceeded according to standard doctrine. Saurian heavy cruisers formed the front line, while Altarian fighters provided reconnaissance. Centauri technical ships stayed in the rear, managing communications and logistics. "Where are the human ships?" Jimin asked. Professor Kai-Jun pointed to a small cluster of vessels on the edge of the formation. 12 ships, he said. A single human squadron assigned to support duties. The Council commanders didn't want to risk human emotional instability affecting the main battle plan. As the engagement began, the other species performed exactly as expected. They followed their assigned roles, maintained formation integrity, and executed textbook tactical maneuvers. The battle was proceeding according to galactic military science. Then everything changed. The human squadron broke formation without orders. Instead of maintaining their support position, they accelerated directly toward the center of the DVAC fleet. The tactical display showed confused communications from other Council commanders asking for clarification of human intentions. "They're attacking," Hyunwoo said in disbelief. 12 ships against 300. "Not attacking," Professor Kai-Jun corrected. "Hunting." The human ships moved through the DVAC formation like predators. They ignored smaller vessels and concentrated on command ships and key tactical targets. When DVAC forces tried to intercept them, the human pilots displayed flying skills that bordered on impossible. But it wasn't just their piloting ability that was remarkable. It was their complete disregard for personal safety. Human fighters would ram enemy vessels when their weapons ran out of ammunition. Damaged human ships would overload their reactors and use themselves as guided missiles against high-value targets. "Listen to their communications," Professor Kai-Jun said, activating the audio channel. The voices of human pilots filled the vault. They were calm, focused, and utterly determined. But there was something else in their tone that made both students uncomfortable. "Remember New Shanghai? one pilot said as he guided his crippled fighter into a Devak cruiser. For the children of Tau Ceti, another voice responded before her ship exploded against an enemy command vessel. They're talking about colonies that were destroyed by Devak raids, Professor Kai-Jun explained. Every human pilot in that battle was fighting for people who were already dead. They weren't trying to win a tactical victory, they were seeking revenge. The battle footage continued for another 20 minutes. By the end, the Devak fleet was in full retreat despite having overwhelming numerical superiority. They had lost nearly 100 ships to concentrated human assault tactics that no military academy in the galaxy taught. The human squadron had been reduced to 2 heavily damaged vessels. 10 ships and their crews had been lost in the attack. By any rational measure, it should have been considered a defeat. The other council species were horrified, Professor Kai-Jun said as the footage ended. They had just watched humans sacrifice 90% of their forces to achieve a single tactical objective. From their perspective, it was insane. But it worked, Jimin pointed out. The Devaks retreated. Yes, it worked. And that terrified the council even more than the casualties. Professor Kai-Jun called up another set of data files. After Kepler 442, emergency sessions were held on every council world. Military analysts tried to understand what they had witnessed. The new files contained psychological profiles and strategic assessments written by alien military experts. The language was clinical, but the underlying fear was obvious. The Saurian Defense Ministry concluded that humans were strategically unpredictable, Professor Kai-Jun read from one report. The Altarian Fleet Command described human tactics as logically unsound but tactically effective. The Centauri Federation called for immediate restrictions on human military deployment. He pulled up more reports, each one expressing similar concerns about human combat behavior. The overwhelming consensus among council species was that humans fought in ways that defied military science. But there's something else, Professor Kai-Jun continued. Something that scared them even more than our tactics. He activated a recording of a council security meeting. The voices belonged to high-ranking military officers from various species, all discussing the implications of human combat effectiveness. The problem isn't that they fight irrationally, said a voice identified as Admiral Korth of the Saurian Navy. The problem is that their irrational methods produce rational results. Our tactical computers cannot predict human behavior, added Fleet Commander Zix of the Altarian forces. Their decisions follow emotional patterns rather than logical analysis. This makes them impossible to counter using standard military doctrine. There's also the question of escalation, said a third voice. Human forces at Kepler 442 were willing to accept complete destruction to achieve their objectives. What happens when they decide a larger objective is worth pursuing? The recording ended, leaving the vault in silence. Professor Kai-Jun turned to face his students, his expression grave. Do you understand now? He asked. The council didn't ban human military forces because we're too weak or primitive. They banned us because we're too dangerous. Hyunwoo felt his understanding of the situation shifting. Dangerous how? Think about what you just heard, Professor Kai-Jun replied. 12 human ships defeated a fleet of 300 by being willing to die for their cause. What would happen if that same mentality was applied on a larger scale? He activated the holographic display again, this time showing a strategic map of the entire galaxy. The Council controls over 4,000 star systems. They have massive fleets, advanced technology, and centuries of military experience. But their entire approach to warfare is based on logical cost-benefit analysis. Professor Kai-Jun highlighted human colonial territories on the map. There were only 47 systems, a tiny fraction of galactic civilization. Humans control less than 1% of inhabited space, he continued. Our technology is inferior, our numbers are smaller, and our military experience is limited. But we have something that other species don't understand. What? Jimin asked. We're willing to lose everything to protect what we consider important. And we consider everything important. The professor called up historical data from Earth's military conflicts. Battle after battle showed the same pattern. Human forces would continue fighting long after logical analysis suggested surrender was the only rational option. Other species fight until the cost exceeds the benefit, Professor Kaijun explained. Humans fight until we win or until there's nothing left to fight with. From the Council's perspective, that makes us the most dangerous military force in the galaxy. But if we're so effective, Hyunwoo said, why not use us against the Divacs? Wouldn't that solve their border problem? Professor Kaijun's smile was cold. That's exactly what they're afraid of. The Council spent centuries establishing rules for warfare, minimizing civilian casualties, respecting surrender, limiting collateral damage. These rules keep galactic conflicts from becoming wars of extermination. He manipulated the display to show recent Divac expansion patterns. The Divacs follow similar rules. They conquer territory and absorb populations, but they don't practice genocide. From the Council's perspective, Divac expansion is preferable to what might happen if humans were given permission to fight without restrictions. You think we would commit genocide? Jimin asked, horrified. I think we would do whatever we believed was necessary to protect our people, Professor Kaijun replied. And other species know that about us. They've studied our history. They know what humans are capable of when we decide something is an existential threat. The vault fell silent as both students absorbed the implications of what they were learning. Everything they thought they knew about their place in galactic civilization was wrong. So why are we here? Hyunwoo finally asked. If the Council is afraid of us, why invite human students to their most? The next few days at the academy were the worst of Hyunwoo's life. News of his defeat had spread to every corner of the massive institution. Everywhere he went, alien students pointed and whispered. Some laughed openly when they saw him walking through the halls with bandages on his face and arms. In the advanced combat theory class, Professor Nix deliberately overlooked Hyunwoo's raised hand when asking questions. When Jimin tried to answer instead, the four-armed instructor shook his blue head. Perhaps we should focus on students who might actually use this knowledge in real warfare, Professor Nix said. Several students snickered at the comment. The cafeteria became an ordeal. Tables would empty when the two humans approached. Students would stand up with their trays and move to different seating areas, making it obvious they did not want to eat near the banned species. During flight simulation training, Hyunwoo found himself partnered with a maintenance robot instead of another student. The instructor, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Commander Volt, explained that no other students had volunteered to work with him. Perhaps this will teach you the importance of choosing appropriate teammates, Commander Volt said through his translation device. Even the Academy's library became hostile territory. When Hyunwoo tried to access research materials about galactic military history, he discovered that his access privileges had been restricted. A librarian with insect-like features clicked her mandibles in annoyance when he complained. These materials are reserved for students who will actually serve in galactic defense forces, she explained. Since humans are banned, you no longer need access to classified tactical information. Jimin watched her friend grow more isolated and depressed with each passing day. His usually straight posture began to slump. The confident expression he normally wore was replaced by defeated resignation. Maybe we should request a transfer, she suggested one evening as they sat alone in their dormitory common room. There are good military academies on Earth. We could learn just as much there. Hyunwoo stared out the window at the alien stars. My father served in the Titan Defense Force, he said quietly. He always told me that humans had to prove themselves worthy of respect from other species. He said we were newcomers to the galaxy and had to work twice as hard to earn our place. Your father couldn't have predicted this, Jimin replied. He couldn't have known the Council would ban our entire species from military service. But he knew we were different, Hyunwoo continued. He knew other species saw us as primitive. Maybe they're right. Maybe we don't belong out here among the stars. Before Jimin could respond, the common room door opened. Commander Zeph entered, his crystalline form refracting the room's lights into rainbow patterns on the walls. The two humans quickly stood at attention. At ease, Commander Zeph said, his wind chime voice echoing in the quiet room. He moved closer, studying their faces with eyes that looked like cut diamonds. "I have been observing the treatment you have received since the Council's decision," either human responded. They had learned that speaking up often made things worse. "I want you to know," Commander Zeph continued, "that not all faculty members support the discrimination you have faced. Some of us requested your inclusion in this academy specifically because we believe your species has unique value." Hyunwoo looked up in surprise. "Requested our inclusion?" "Yes," Commander Zeph said. "Your admission to this academy was not random. Certain instructors argued that human tactical thinking could benefit galactic defense strategies. We specifically asked for human students." "But why?" Jimin asked. "If we're so primitive, why would advanced species want to study with us?" Commander Zeph was quiet for a long moment. His crystalline body seemed to dim as if he were deep in thought. "That is a complex question with a complex answer. Perhaps it would be better to show you." He activated a small holographic projector and called up a star chart of the contested border regions where the Divac Empire was expanding into Council space. "The Divacs have conquered 17 systems in the past 2 years," Commander Zeph explained. "Their military strategy is sophisticated and adaptable. Traditional galactic defense tactics have proven inadequate against their forces." The hologram zoomed in on specific battle sites. Each one showed the same pattern. Council forces would engage the Divacs using standard formations and strategies, only to be outmaneuvered and defeated. "Every major species has contributed forces to the border defense," Commander Zeph continued. "Saurian shock troops, Altarian fleet commanders, Centauri technical specialists, even my own people's strategic analysis capabilities. Nothing has been effective." "What does this have to do with humans?" Hyunwoo asked. "Human forces were never deployed against the Divacs," Commander Zeph replied. "The Council voted for the ban before any human ships could reach the combat zones. But certain military analysts believe that human tactical approaches might offer solutions that other species have not considered." Jimin frowned. "But we don't have any special weapons or technology. Our ships are based on designs from other species. Our training follows standard galactic military doctrine." "Technology is not everything," Commander Zeph said. "Sometimes, the way a species thinks about problems is more important than the tools they use to solve them." The crystalline commander walked to the window and looked out at the Academy's training grounds. "I have studied military history from dozens of worlds," he said. "Human warfare patterns are unique. Your species approaches conflict differently than others in the galaxy." "How so?" Hyunwoo asked. "Most galactic species view warfare as a logical exercise," Commander Zeph explained. "They calculate odds, minimize losses, and withdraw when victory becomes unlikely. This is rational behavior that preserves lives and resources." He turned back to face the 2 students. "But human military history suggests a different approach. Your species has a tendency to continue fighting even when logic dictates retreat. You seem willing to accept enormous casualties to achieve objectives that other species would consider not worth the cost." "You make it sound like we're crazy," Jimin said. "Not crazy," Commander Zeph corrected. "Different, and sometimes different. Approaches succeed where conventional methods fail." The commander deactivated the holographic display and moved toward the door. "I wanted you to know that not everyone at this academy considers humans worthless. Some of us believe your species may have strategic value that others do not recognize." As he reached the door, he paused. "There is a restricted section of the Academy archives that contains classified battle footage from recent conflicts. Section 7, Level 5. The access code is Omega 77 Delta." "Why are you telling us this?" Hyunwoo asked. Commander Zeph's crystalline form seemed to pulse with inner light. "Because I think you should understand why the Council really banned your species from military service, and why some of us requested your presence at this academy despite that ban." He left without explaining further, leaving the 2 humans alone, with more questions than answers. That night, Hyunwoo couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Commander Zeph's words and the access code the instructor had given them. Finally, he got up and quietly woke Jimin. "We need to go to the archives," he whispered. Jimin was instantly awake. It's after midnight, we'll be caught. Commander Zeph gave us that access code for a reason, Hyunwoo replied. He wants us to see whatever is in those classified files. They dressed quickly and made their way through the academy's darkened corridors. The night lighting cast long shadows between the massive stone pillars. Their footsteps echoed despite their attempts to walk quietly. The archive building was separate from the main academy complex. It was a tall tower made of black metal that reflected the 3 moons hanging in the purple sky. Security scanners at the entrance verified their student credentials before allowing them inside. Section 7 was deep underground. They took a Daito high-speed elevator down 5 levels, emerging into a corridor lined with sealed vault doors. Each door was marked with symbols in various alien languages warning about classified contents. Level 5 contained the most sensitive materials. The access code Commander Zeph had given them opened a vault filled with holographic storage devices. Thousands of small crystals lined the walls, each one containing massive amounts of data. What exactly are we looking for? Jimin whispered. Hyunwoo began reading the catalog labels on the storage crystals. Most were marked with military designation codes he didn't recognize. Then he found a section labeled Human Combat Analysis, Restricted Access. There were dozens of crystals in this section, each one containing battle footage and tactical analysis from various human military conflicts. The dates ranged from ancient Earth wars to recent colonial defense actions. This is it, he said, selecting a crystal marked Recent Border Conflicts, Classification Level Alpha. They inserted the crystal into a holographic display terminal. After a moment of processing, the system requested additional authorization. Access denied, the computer announced in a neutral voice. This material requires Level 7 clearance. Hyunwoo entered the code Commander Zeph had given them, Omega 77 Delta. The system paused for several seconds. Then the display activated, filling the small vault with 3-dimensional images of space combat. What they saw, the morning air on Nexus Prime was thick and heavy. 3 suns hung in the purple sky, casting strange shadows across the massive stone buildings of the Vorthak Galactic Military Academy. Students from 17 different worlds walked through the wide halls, their various forms creating a colorful mix of scales, fur, crystal, and flesh. Hyunwoo sat in the back row of the strategic warfare classroom, trying to ignore the whispers around him. His dark hair was cut short in military style, and his brown eyes stayed focused on the holographic display at the front of the room. Next to him, Jimin took careful notes on her datapad. Both humans wore the standard gray academy uniforms, but somehow they still stood out among their alien classmates. Commander Zeph's crystalline body caught the light from the 3 suns as he moved around the room. His voice sounded like wind chimes when he spoke. Today we will discuss the recent emergency decision by the Galactic Council, he announced. As you all know, human military forces have been banned from participating in the border conflicts with the Divac Empire. The classroom erupted in noise. Students turned to look at the 2 humans with expressions ranging from amusement to disgust. Talon Crix, a large reptilian creature with green scales and sharp teeth, laughed loudest of all. Finally, Talon said, his forked tongue flicking out. The council admits what we all knew. Humans are too primitive for real war. Several other students nodded in agreement. A floating energy being named Vex Nomura pulsed with bright colors. Their emotions make them unstable, Vex said in a voice that sounded like singing. They cannot think clearly in battle. Hyunwoo's hands formed fists under his desk. His jaw muscles tightened as he listened to his classmates mock his entire species. Jimin noticed his anger and placed a gentle hand on his arm. She shook her head slightly, warning him to stay calm. But why ban them completely? Asked a student with 4 arms and blue skin. Surely they could serve in support roles. Talon's laugh was cruel. Have you seen their test scores? They barely understand basic strategy. Their minds work too slowly for modern warfare. More laughter filled the room. Commander Zeph raised one crystalline hand for silence. That is enough discussion for now, he said. We will focus on tactical formations, but the damage was done. For the rest of the class, students kept glancing at Hyunwoo and Jimin. Some looked amused. Others appeared disgusted. A few seemed almost afraid, as if being near humans might somehow contaminate them. When the class ended, the two humans gathered their materials slowly. They waited until most of the other students had left before standing up. As they walked toward the door, they could hear fragments of conversation in the hallway. "I heard humans still use projectile weapons," one voice said. "So barbaric," another replied. "No wonder the council banned them. My father says they fight like wild animals. At least now we won't have to worry about them during real missions." The words followed Hyunwoo and Jimin as they walked through the academy's marble corridors. Their footsteps echoed in the vast spaces, mixing with the sounds of alien languages and the hum of advanced technology. In the cafeteria, the situation grew worse. When the two humans approached a table where they usually sat, the alien students there suddenly found reasons to leave. One by one, tables emptied as Hyunwoo and Jimin looked for places to eat their lunch. They finally sat alone at a small table near the windows. Outside, they could see the Academy's training grounds where advanced fighters practiced aerial maneuvers. The sleek ships moved in perfect formation, their pilots communicating through quantum links that allowed instant coordination. "Maybe we should transfer back to Earth," Jimin said quietly. She poked at her food without much appetite. "This is only going to get worse." Hyunwoo shook his head. "That's exactly what they want. They want us to give up and go home." He took a bite of his meal, though it tasted like ash in his mouth. "My grandfather didn't survive the Mars colony wars, so I could quit at the first sign of trouble." "But what's the point?" Jimin asked. "They've already decided we don't belong here. The council has banned our entire military. Maybe they're right. Maybe we are too primitive." Before Hyunwoo could answer, a shadow fell across their table. They looked up to see Talon Crick standing above them, his scaled head nearly touching the ceiling. Several other students stood behind him, forming a semicircle around the human's table. "I couldn't help but overhear," Talon said, his reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile. "You're thinking about leaving? That would probably be best for everyone." Hyunwoo set down his fork carefully. "We have as much right to be here as anyone else." "Do you?" Talon's yellow eyes narrowed. "Your species has been banned from active military service. What's the point of training soldiers who will never see real combat?" Other students in the cafeteria had stopped eating to watch the confrontation. The large room grew quiet except for the soft hum of the air recycling system. "The ban is temporary," Jimin said, though her voice lacked conviction. Vex Nomura floated closer, the energy being's form shifting between different colors. "My people have access to council records," Vex said. The vote wasn't even close. 15 species voted for the ban. Only 2 opposed it. "Which 2? Hyunwoo asked. "The Altarians and the Centauri Federation," Vex replied. "Both human-friendly species. Even your allies think you're dangerous." Talon leaned down, bringing his massive head closer to the human students. "My father serves on the Saurian Defense Council," he said quietly. "He told me the real reason for the ban. It's not that humans are too weak for war. It's that you're too unstable, too emotional. You make decisions based on feelings instead of logic." The reptilian student straightened up and crossed his muscular arms. "Emotional soldiers get their allies killed," he continued. "The council banned humans to protect the rest of us from your incompetence." Hyunwoo started to stand, but Jimin grabbed his wrist. She could see the anger building in his eyes and knew that any reaction would only prove Talon's point about human emotional instability. "We should go," she whispered. But Talon wasn't finished. "Actually," he said, "I have a better idea. Since you humans think you belong in a military academy, why don't we test that theory? I challenge you to single combat in the training center, tonight after evening meal." The cafeteria fell completely silent. Challenge matches were legal at the academy, but they were rarely used. Most species preferred to settle disputes through debate or formal complaints. Hyunwoo looked up at the towering reptilian, Talon was at least 2 feet taller and probably twice as heavy. Saurians had natural armor in their scales and reflexes that made them excellent warriors. Fighting him would be like a house cat challenging a tiger. I accept, Hyunwoo said. Jimin turned to stare at her friend in shock. Hyunwoo, no, you can't be serious. But the human student was already standing. He met Talon's yellow gaze without flinching. Tonight, he said simply. Training Center 7, standard rules. Talon's laugh rumbled through the cafeteria. Standard rules it is, don't worry, human, I'll try not to hurt you too badly. As the alien students dispersed, talking excitedly about the upcoming fight, Jimin pulled Hyunwoo aside. Are you insane? She hissed. He'll tear you apart. Saurians are built for combat. Hyunwoo's expression was calm but determined. Maybe, he said. But I won't let them say we're cowards. I won't let them think humans run away from fights. That evening, word of the challenge had spread throughout the academy. Students gathered in Training Center 7 to watch the match. The circular room had padded floors and energy barriers to contain the fight. Medical staff stood ready with healing equipment. Commander Zeph arrived just before the combat began. His crystalline form reflected the bright lights of the training center as he took his position as the official referee. This is a formal challenge match, Commander Zeph announced. Standard Academy rules apply. The match ends when one participant yields or is unable to continue. Medical intervention is authorized if necessary. Hyunwoo stood in the center of the ring wearing standard combat gear. He looked small and fragile compared to Talon, who stretched, his massive frame and flexed claws that could cut through metal. The fight began with the sound of a chime. Talon moved faster than seemed possible for such a large creature, his powerful legs launching him across the ring. Hyunwoo barely dodged the first attack, rolling to the side as Talon's claws scraped the floor where he had been standing. But Talon's speed and strength were overwhelming. The reptilian warrior's natural advantages made the outcome inevitable. After several minutes of desperate dodging and failed attempts at counterattacks, Hyunwoo found himself pinned to the floor, Talon's clawed hand around his throat. Yield, Talon commanded. Hyunwoo looked up at the circle of alien faces watching him. He saw amusement, satisfaction, and contempt. In their eyes, he was everything they believed humans to be. Weak, primitive, and defeated. I yield, he whispered. Talon released him and stood up, raising his arms in victory. The watching students cheered for their champion. As medical staff helped the battered human to his feet, Talon addressed the crowd. This is why the council banned them, he declared. Humans are weak. They cannot protect themselves, much less fight alongside us against real enemies. The cheers grew louder. Students clapped and whistled their